coming up on today's episode.
I think ultimately we have to understand that a buyer's role in the transaction is very different to our role, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to get it for the least amount as possible with the best terms favourable. Our job ultimately is trying to get the most for our owners. They're paying us, so we have to understand that. But there are so many instances where the deals are run so smoothly, whether it be negotiated or at auction, when there's some form of transparency. Now, no one's expecting a buyer to turn up and say, this is my budget, I'll give you top of my budget, Go to the owners, above market price and see what they say.
That's a good day.
Right? That's fantastic.
Dodgy advice and bad decisions can cost you big in real estate. We're here to make sure that that doesn't happen. Welcome to the No BS Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Agresta, and it's time to take control of your property journey together.
Hey, I'm Tai Menahem, Director at Buxton Real Estate and Auctioneer, of course, as well. Today I'm on the No BS podcast, and we're going to be talking all things auctions, campaigns, everything in between. Can't wait to get started.
Welcome back, everyone, to the No BS Real Estate Podcast, your listening how-to guide to the Aussie finance and real estate market. I'm your host, Joe Agresta. Today, we're talking about auctions, but not just the part everyone sees on a Saturday morning, because by the time the auctioneer is standing out the front calling for bids, there usually has been a few weeks of strategy behind the scenes: pricing, buyer feedback, open homes, contract questions, reserve conversations, vendor meetings, and sometimes a lot of negotiation. I'm joined today by Tai Menahem, the Director and Auctioneer at Buxton Real Estate Ashburton, and we're unpacking what actually happens before, during and after an auction campaign. So by the end of the episode, you guys will understand how to prepare properly, what makes them look serious, what happens if a property passes in, and why leaving everything until the last minute can hurt your chances. And sellers will understand how an auction campaign is built, what buyer feedback is really telling them, and why auction day is not just about hope, it's about strategy. So without further ado, Tai, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited because we met in such weird circumstances. So to give backstory, I contacted Tai because I had a buyer's advocate that had a client looking for a property, but we're also filming some content with him as part of, another thing that we're doing, another project. And when I spoke to Tai, I said, would you be cool with us coming through with like a camera crew and filming this house and filming this guy and your conversation?
Yeah.
And you were so good about it.
Have to be.
You reckon?
I reckon. Yeah, it was. I reckon the stars aligned at that point. We met. It was a good conversation. The owners were intrigued. They were seeing all these people turning up to their open home with cameras and everything. They're wondering what was going on, and I think we had some good conversations, which have led to today.
Oh, 100%. Like, what led me to wanting to bring you on the show is I loved the way you interacted with the advocate. So the advocate was Scott Agard, who's a regular on our show, and yeah, just the way you handled like all his questions, all his concerns that he flagged, and I just thought that's a decent agent, and there's not many out there. I think everyone always craps on about, agents are bad. And I'm like, the point of my show is to bring the good ones in and say, this is who you should work with.
Well, it felt like the pressure was on with the cameras right at me as well. It's like making sure I answered all those questions right.
No, you did a really good job. And looking back at the footage, I was like, oh man, he handled that so well, because I think a lot of people would have been like, shit. So no, kudos to you. That's why I wanted to bring you on. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, some context, right? So before we get into the auction mechanics, let's start with yourself, because obviously I know you a little bit, but people haven't heard about you, on our show yet. So for those that haven't come across you before, can you tell us a bit about like who you are, what you do, and the kind of market you work in?
Absolutely. So obviously, name, as we've said already, Tai Menahem. I'm one of the directors and auctioneers at Buxton Ashburton and Camberwell. I've been doing it for the better part of 7 years now. So I started when I was 19. So I'll let you do the maths on that. I've been doing auctions now for probably 5 years. So I got into it pretty quickly. I reckon I've done somewhere close to around 500 auctions now. So pretty acutely aware of how they run, the strategies, everything behind the scenes that needs to go, the KPIs we're looking for. The area we service, so we do a lot sort of Boroondara, Monash, a bit of Stonington as well. That's pretty much blue collar from that perspective as well. Like most people's only home that they have. Sometimes, we get a few of the other homes that are around sort of that $3 to $4 million mark, but typically between $1 to $2 million is what we sell.
I wanted to ask too, like, because you've got a decent history. 7 years is a long time. When did you start? And 500 auctions, by the way, huge.
Yeah.
What made you want to kind of cross over into auctions, or was that something you set out to do from the beginning?
Honestly, no. I just got too busy, and we have a couple of other directors within our business who were doing auctions for everyone else, and it gets to a point where I was hogging them all up on a Saturday. So you're running 4 or 5 auctions, and there's no times for anyone else to have it. And we had the conversation of it's probably about time that, one, we don't have the time to service your auctions. 2, as you're progressing now into a standalone agent, it's better for presence, it's better for confidence. So I took that leap forward, and believe me, it was a big leap forward. I was not that keen to do it, but probably the best thing I've ever done.
That's unreal. So what, were you nervous about being the one to call the auction itself?
I was nervous about it all.
Yeah.
I remember my first auction, I spent the better part of that whole 4-week campaign just practicing for that one day, just what I'm going to say. Probably I had a whole script printed out, and then, just before the auction, I was revving myself up, and one of the guys tapped me on the back and ironically felt how much sweat was dripping off me. It's like, good luck, mate. Just remember, this will be your first, and you'll have many more afterwards, which, set me on my way, which is good.
And could I ask, was it a successful auction?
It was, thank God.
Oh, nice. That's what you needed.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, good on you. I think I love hearing how people came into it, because it was something that I was too nervous to do when I was a real estate agent. And I remember my boss said, you'd be good at calling it. And I'm like, no, I don't think I've got the balls for it. Just let me be an agent.
Yeah.
I said, this is hard enough.
And I can understand why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, kudos to you. When I say auctioneers, I'm like, that's a lot of pressure. It's like acting. I see it a lot as a performance, because you're having to memorize the details of the house, the buyers, you're getting them all excited.
Correct.
And the crowd work. Yeah.
The numbers, everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So I always see it as I'm like a comedian doing crowd work. And I'm like, oh, fuck, that's a lot of pressure.
Sometimes you feel like a comedian. Sometimes you might be the worst comedian. Get absolutely no laughs. You're like, that was a stinker. Keep moving.
It's like when you're in a meeting and you're presenting on a webinar.
Yeah.
And you land a joke, but everyone's on mute. So you're just like, ha ha.
Yeah, that was good on time.
It's like, nice.
Yeah.
So I totally get the pressure. So I'm like always, have to give you kudos for that.
Appreciate it.
And I guess before we go too far ahead, we need to read out today's no BS statement. Now, for those that are new around here, yourself, Tai, as well, we'll read out a statement that basically we want you to determine if it's bullshit or not bullshit by the end of the episode. So the statement today is, a passed-in auction tells you the campaign didn't create enough buyer competition on the day. So we're not going to answer that yet. But at the end, we'll see if that is BS or not. Now, I guess let's start with the topic, auctions, right? Because I think a lot of people have a lot of misunderstandings. They see it as exactly what's advertised on TV. It's you walk up, you put your hand up, you win it, you walk out.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, it's a bigger event, and there's so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So, what do buyers and sellers often misunderstand about, what a real estate agent is actually doing during an auction campaign?
It's a really good question. I think there's a few. The major one, I think, from a buyer's side of things is perhaps maybe not understanding that the real estate agent is quite literally just trying to put the deal together on both sides. Now, sometimes an auction date doesn't necessarily mean the home is scheduled only to go for the auction.
Yeah.
And buyers may just perceive that with an auction day, we have 4 weeks, we'll turn up, we won't communicate with the agent. We probably might even, I've had instances even in the last week where we'll just lie to them and then turn up on auction day.
Love that.
And then unfortunately, as the agent, we can only deal on face value, right? So then we have to report back, give the facts, plan accordingly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, yes, we're making a deal on both sides and both parties are 50% of the deal, but we do represent the owner. So we do have to look at how we then proceed of, do we sell before auction? Do we run to auction? Do we extend the campaign? What are the strategies then in place to get us sold? But if we don't have the right intel, we can't help that buyer actually buy the home.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it does, and I think this is where there's a lot of misunderstanding around real estate agents and the role they play in the market, and especially on auction, it is deal making. So there's no intention where someone's trying to screw you on a bad deal. I'm sure bad apples exist in every industry where there's probably someone with bad intentions, but the good agents or the good auctioneers, they're there to make it happen.
Yeah.
Like for the seller, but also the buyer. They don't want you to have a bad experience because you're hoping you get that property back in, 7 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like then they become your clients and they sell with you and go, oh, Ty was really fair as selling to us.
Yeah.
I want to use him again.
Well, that's the name of the game ultimately. It's long term. So I think maybe that might be a bit of a misconception. And even on the other side as well, some owners don't probably understand, may not be as educated initially, that the auction day again is just the last day of a 4-week setup. But some instances you might get your best offer from your best buyer day one.
Yep.
Right.
That's true. Like even when I did real estate, I remember my boss said to me, first offer's best offer often. And I used to always think that was bullshit, but then I was in a bad market. I was in right after GFC.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm like, no, she's right, because we never went well after that. So I always trusted her judgment there. But like, I guess that's like the before auction bids, like, do you take them? Do you not take them? All those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think it depends on the owner, depends on the motivation, which, when we sit down and we engage with an owner and they engage with us, we typically have what we call a set to sell meeting before we even launch it. And obviously buyers don't see any of that, right?
Yeah.
So with us, we're sitting with the owner and we're having another chat after we've had photos, which is probably a month after we initially got engaged to sell the home, right? And we're chatting about, are we okay with this strategy? Is the timing that we're going fine? Is the pricing aligned with what the market's saying currently? But probably the most important part of it is, what's the motivation? How quickly do you want it sold? And if there was an offer, what would it take to buy it before you went to auction? So we're working out all of those things. Now, some owners say, no, we need that space to just see what the market says. Some owners say, look, we're not fussed. If we get the offer beforehand, we're not adverse to sell.
Yeah, which I think, and that's where you see I think a lot of our buyers in general, like I've seen this even as an advocate on the other side, sometimes like the vendors are motivated and they'll take your offer and they'll entertain it and negotiate. And sometimes we can take it off market before the auction.
Yeah.
In other cases though, they're very hard. They want to go to auction. Yeah. They're not going to even look at, even if you offered top of the line max price, they're not going to look at it.
Yeah. And
I think for a lot of buyers, that's where they have this idea that they can take any property off the market with the right price, but it's not always.
Not always the case, is it?
Well, that's right. Because like from your perspective as well, you said like you're having these conversations with the vendor up front and they're telling you no. So it's like you have to kind of look after and respect it.
Yeah, it's their decision. It's their home ultimately, right? When we have these conversations around when an owner says, well, what happens with terms? What happens with reserves? Ultimately, the simple answer is it's your home. You dictate as the owner what you're going to sell for, technically speaking, and the terms in which you're going to sell with as well.
Well, the terms are a big one too, because I think that's where a lot of buyers misunderstand that process, but I'm getting too far ahead because we are going to cover it.
Okay, we'll scale back then.
So we'll scale back slightly. I guess where I want to talk about is like the campaign setup. Like you said, there's a long-winded process before it even gets taken to market, let alone the market campaign before the auction day. So auction day is like really the last day, as you mentioned, So before the property's live online, can you walk us through the basic structure of a typical like 4-week campaign leading up to auction day?
Yeah. So a 4-week campaign is on market. As I said, there's a bit that happens a little bit before, and there are some instances where we'll list the property on the Monday, it goes online on the Thursday, and that campaign runs pretty quick. There's some where you've met them a month, 2 months prior, and then with timing, you've put it on the market. So it's case by case, but typically speaking, the week before we put it on the market, there's an assessment with the owners that we catch up. What's sold, what's on the market, what are we competing with, what's on that day that we're going to auction, if we are going to auction. How do we need to price it? What are your motivations, right? Then we'll put it on the market. We usually run a 4-week campaign in 3 phases. So first phase is what we call the research phase, where technically speaking, we're now putting ourselves out there to the market to be judged, to have feedback, to have probably the most amount of footsteps coming through the open homes. Usually, and what we convey to the owners is Mr. and Mrs. Vendors, week 1, probably an 80% chance we meet our best buyer. Week 2, that probably skyrockets to 95, 100% that we'll meet our best buyer. Now, maybe not 100, but definitely at 95, I'd say. That's what we would call research phase. Post that, then we catch up with the owners. That's after our second Saturday, and we catch up again. We say, this is what the feedback is. It's where the buyers are currently suggesting they see value. These are the terms they're putting out to us. This is what we recommend currently. Now, that recommendation could be one of 2 things. Mr. and Mrs. Vendors, we've got great interest or somewhat interest with a number of parties at a similar level. We think we need the exposure and the day in the sun and auction day. Let's run it. Or we think right now there's probably a bit of a gap between the two or the three buyers. Let's maybe look at negotiating prior. So it just depends on that.
A quick pause, we'll be right back. Here's a word from one of our sponsors who supports the show. If you're looking at short stays, or maybe you want to turn your own property into an investment or money-making funnel, then talking to Belinda Markowski at Short and Long Stays is the person to speak with. She specialises in using Airbnb type of properties to make you an income on your next investment property, from converting rooms to maximising returns. She understands how to run short and long-term investment strategies from start to finish. Her details are in the show notes below. So that's interesting, right? Because this is all the stuff that people don't see. And I think from the buyer side, this is where they're they're much less prepared for auction. This is where they don't know they have to have terms.
Correct.
And I think you were telling me the other week, you're like, I had someone that came in like 2 or 3 days before auction saying, I'm coming to the auction and I need you to negotiate terms. And you're like,
yeah, they turned up to the auction and they pulled out the contract and they're like, well, we want this condition. And bear in mind, this is 10 minutes before the auction's about to start.
Oh, shit.
Pulling out the contract. We want this changed. We want this changed. We want this changed. The lawyers don't work on Saturdays most of the time. No. So I was on the phone to the lawyer and luckily she'd answered, but the terms were too ambiguous. They were trying to change. So unfortunately, we said appreciate it, but we can't actually change these terms. And the owners understood it. It is what it is. He ended up not bidding or buying it anyway. And someone else did. But we were forced to we had to protect our owners ultimately in that situation.
But I think you're in doing that protection for the owners, you're also doing a service to the buyers because if they're concerned about those conditions, it would have been very easy for you to go, don't worry about the conditions, just bid and you'll be right.
Yeah.
But you did, you said to them, like, we're not going to, if you want to change all of this, we can't. So I think in the end, you've done them a favour in not wasting their time or their.
They didn't feel that way, but
I can imagine they wouldn't because they would have been frustrated. And I get it's disappointing, but it's the whole purpose of why we have these discussions with someone like yourself, because it's like, well, how do you, like, what do you expect, I guess, a good buyer to do but when you've put that auction out there?
It's a good question. I think ultimately we have to understand that a buyer's role in the transaction is very different to our role, right? Yep. And they're trying to get it for the least amount as possible with the best terms favorable. Our job ultimately is trying to get the most for our owners. They're paying us. So we have to understand that. But, there are so many instances where the deals are run so smoothly, whether it be negotiated or at auction, when there's some form of transparency. Now, no one's expecting a buyer to turn up and say, this is my budget. I'll give you top of my budget. Go to the owners, above market price and see what they say.
That's a good day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But I do think open transparency from both parties is where we get a really good outcome. For example, a buyer coming through and saying, look, this is why I see value because of X, Y, and Z with logic. We respect that, open to those conversations, and something that's respectable for the owners to actually look at. Now, again, making sure that we understand that you're not going to put your best foot forward, but some form of a step forward is a step forward, right? In saying that too, then we can relay that back to the owners and give them an accurate understanding of where their campaign sits. And if the buyer genuinely wants to buy it, well, we can help them if we can get the right information.
Yeah, and I think that's from the buyer's side, it's like, I think everyone says, don't talk to the agent, don't say anything. And it's like, but they're people. If you have the conversation, it's probably going to benefit you more.
Yeah, well, and I get it. Like when I was buying my home, I was the same. I had some agents and I'm like, I'm an agent myself. How are you, like, what are you trying to push? What's going on here? So I get it. There's bad eggs in every industry, but you can't generalize everyone. And not to say that buyers do, but ultimately I think if an agent is being respectful, if they're conducting themselves in a really well-mannered approach, and doing everything in their ability to try and help this buyer, which I feel our team do very well, we would want some form of that back.
Yeah, of course. And that's why it goes back to my point before that, like, ultimately these buyers could become your vendors in like 5 to 7 years or even later.
Yeah.
You don't want them to have a bad experience or walk away saying, I feel ripped off.
No, and exactly right. Like, it's funny, I was listening to a podcast today in the gym and one of the agents that was on there was saying, if a buyer is looking to buy, he's not necessarily trying to sell them something. If a buyer wants to buy something, like, let's be honest, they'll buy it, right? Yep. Our job is to try and get the most out of them, but they'll buy it. So he was saying his job is really to say when a buyer becomes a seller, he wants that buyer to remember him and sell with him.
Yeah.
That's really the long-term approach that I think any good agent has.
Yep, 100%. I couldn't agree more on that point. And I guess, one of the things that you mentioned is pricing, right? The campaign, right? Going back to that, before a property officially launches online, what are you doing with pricing, buyer conversations and off-market interest? Like, how does that kind of all come to a head?
Yep. So we obviously have a list of buyers. Typically, if we're selling in the same areas, you're going to have buyers that you're going to be able to speak to. So we run a 10-day to 2-week approach where we take buyers through what we call pre-market. We don't use off-market because it will be coming on market.
Yeah.
But it's a pre-market approach where they can buy it before it goes on the internet, or alternatively, they're just going to give us price feedback.
So is that something that gets communicated like through your, email communications to whoever your database is?
Emails, texts, phone calls a lot of the time as well. We probably have the most cut through on phone calls and texts rather than emails at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine that too, because stock is so competitive.
Very.
I think as soon as you make a phone call to an active buyer, they're going to take it and go, okay, what have you got?
Yeah, exactly right.
Because you do a lot of deal making too. Like, I guess from the agent side, you're trying to find that buyer. You've remembered someone that missed out on a property maybe like a month ago or 2 weeks ago, and then they're still on market looking to buy.
Yeah.
If this suits them, you're going to call them.
Well, you want to.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think as a buyer, you'd want to know that information too. If there's like a chance that you can get in before it's ultra competitive on realestate.com.
Correct.
Why not?
Yeah. And I think people miss out on those opportunities sometimes, like, just maybe not responding. I had one where they were an underbidder last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry. They were underbidder. We had a duplex townhouse. They were the underbidder. I had listed the place next door, identical homes. They did not communicate with me, would not return my calls. Trying to get them on the phone was impossible. We ended up selling next door, and they texted me, ironically enough, like 3 days later, what have you got? I'm thinking, I had the perfect one for you, but we spent 2 weeks trying to chase them around, and at the end of the day, someone presented an offer.
Yeah, and I think this is the tough part for buyers because there's a lot of emotions behind it. Even for vendors, it's such an emotional process selling and buying.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling overwhelmed by the communication and then you wait to see the results, I think there's a lot of waiting. And I always try to say to buyers, like, if there's an opportunity, it's actually really hard to find the right property.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you found the right property but you're overwhelmed or nervous, this is the time to kind of act in a way, you know, or find support, like talk to your broker, talk to a buyer's advocate and just say, help me out here because I'm a mess. It's like I don't know how to act.
Yeah, which is totally fair.
100%. Like like I said, I get it. Like even when I bought my house, it was the same thing. I'm like trying to go through all my emotions and I'm like, shit, I'm finding this really hard because I want to get emotional.
As well.
Yeah, because it's all your savings, all your hard work. It's like, I don't want to make a shit investment.
Yeah.
I don't want to stuff this up. And so I get the pressure. And I think one of the interesting things too is like that first 2 weeks of the campaign, once it's live, like you said, you've measured, as well, the buyer intent. And how do you have those conversations with the vendor when the pricing or the campaign's not where you see it, like where it should be?
Yeah, that is probably the most challenging part of our job, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
The market has changed and turned. So getting it right is important, but there's still many cases where you're not getting it right. So those conversations are measured with KPIs. So Mr. and Mrs. Vendors, week 1, we expect X amount of buyers based on the internet statistics that we've been shot from REA and Domain. So we're able to measure that quite accurately. Week 2, we're expecting status quo or a bit more, a bit less, but contract requests are now becoming more important. We're looking for repeat inspections. If we don't get above 5 or 10 groups, this is what the expectation is. These are the alarm bells that we're starting to ring to yourself. And then if week 2 we're experiencing something similar, most of my owners are very acutely aware that if you are getting under a certain amount of buyers coming through by week 2, there's a price adjustment that needs to be had along with probably some reinvestment into marketing.
Right. So I guess that was the big question because this is where from that buyer perspective, they see the price change online and they automatically assume because buyers track properties, I think, better than some agents.
Probably.
They're honed in and they'll, I've often had conversations going, I noticed there was a price change on that property. Why is that? And I'm like, it's probably not selling at the market rate, to be honest. I said, like, they're not getting interest. So now they're trying to generate it. And they're like, oh, so is something wrong with it? And I'm like, no, that's not always what it means. It's just they're not getting demand, at that rate. And that's all it is. So, you just try your luck, but who knows what the expectation will be.
Well, there's a buyer at every price, we always say. Like, when you get the price right, the magic buyer turns up.
Correct.
Our hope is that magical buyers turn up.
Of course.
When we do that. But, I think, short Short answer, of course, to a buyer, and we get that question a lot, is there's nothing wrong with the home. We just didn't have enough interest at the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess when you talked about the marketing campaign side of things like that reinvestment, what kind of, in your eyes, like, because a lot of sellers, I think, hesitate at marketing fees sometimes and they feel like it's a bit too much of a cost.
Yeah.
What's like what the most impactful thing you think in a marketing campaign for the property?
Realestate.com and domain.
Yep.
Yeah. Still, I think a lot of people are changing a few things in terms of social media. The crux of it is the basics still work. And that investment into realestate.com and domain premiums on both sides, that's where the money is, right? That's where the buyers are. We are doing a lot in social media still, but the initial conversation is recommendations around realestate.com and domain. And then if we need to reinvest, that's either in one of the two or social media.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense too, because like that's the shift I'm noticing is I think there's a lot of organic socials from the agent, like whoever the agent is. Like even I think yourself, like you've posted good content on your page. No, you do well. And I was going to say it's really cool to see the shift, but at the same time I was curious. So real estate and domain are still the leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's where the buyers
if you're
are.
a buyer, where are you going to look?
Yeah, real estate.
I'm sure everyone's on Facebook and Instagram to socialize, not necessarily to look, right? If you're an active buyer to look, we've all been there. You're on realestate.com, you're on domain, you're contacting the agents to see what they've got.
Yeah, that's accurate. So, and I think that's where people kind of like go, oh, you're going to do a social media ad? And it's like, yeah, we can.
We can.
But how effective is it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the ultimate question. So it's like investing it wisely and into those premium listing spots too.
You got to fish where the fish are.
Yeah, because the premium listing, does that still give you like that status that you appear on every page or something like that?
Yeah, so with realestate.com, they've even got now like that Luxe listing where you can add multiple photos instead of just the one to the hero shot as well. And that rotates every 9 days, gives you a wider network of buyers that they actually attract to it. So I think they even go down to like as far down as like Mount Eliza and attract buyers to our areas, which is pretty cool. And those are things that, yes, social media can do, but these are, companies and websites, they have access to the buyers we want, the buyers that have the money, the buyers that we might not necessarily have.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's the key thing. It's where are those buyers where they're not just at your front door.
Exactly.
And you have to find them on those mediums. And, I want to talk about, I guess, buyer behavior, like quality versus quantity, right? Yeah. Because the campaign, like as it gets closer to that auction day, it becomes less about how many people came through. And I think then it becomes about, well, who's coming through and what's their intention. Yeah. So at what point does the campaign, shift, and what are the signs you can tell a buyer is serious?
So there's probably a few. Contract requests usually are a good indication, but now it seems like a lot of people just come in and ask for a contract and we can see if they've opened it or not. A lot of it's never opened. So
there you go. There's your intent.
Yeah, that's a good initial indication. Second, inspections, building inspections, and then, of course, questions around a contract. Typically speaking, if you're doing a building inspection, that's an investment. So someone's going to have to pay at least $1,000 to get a building inspection done. I wouldn't have thought a buyer's going to do that if they're not showing interest, right?
Well, that's true. They're not going to ask. They're not going to do any of those signs.
Yeah. Likewise, even with the contract, to get a contract review, it costs money. Lawyers don't do that for free. So you've got to pick your mark as a buyer. Which ones do I like? Which ones am I going to get reviewed so that I can move forward on them? So those become the real KPIs we're looking for. We're moving away from quantity to quality buys.
And then at what point would you recommend for buyers, like if they have serious intent, they've asked for the review, and let's say the auction is like 2 weeks away, from the date itself, what should they be doing in that time if they're serious, they love the house? Yeah. What steps do you recommend they take to be like acknowledged as a serious buyer?
So communicate with us, but I think before that it would be come and have a look for a second time. Second time, usually you would say a buyer's coming in to look for things, to look for space, to see how it would work with their furniture, fixtures, fittings a bit more closely, as opposed to that first time of, I like the home to the naked eye, at surface level. So second inspection, then it would be, of course, contract reviewed, getting the building inspection done, and then having a very clear conversation with us or whatever the agent is of, hey, what's the process look like currently and how is the campaign currently moving? Is it looking like an auction is going to happen, or are they open to an auction, an offer prior? Asking that question is great because we can have that conversation with an owner and say, hey, would you if it was at this price, what do you think would happen, etc. Right? So being open again with the agent. That doesn't mean coming in with a checkbook and saying take that to the owner, but having that conversation, making them aware. What we do on the other end, if we're not getting that engagement from a buyer, we're probably being a little bit bullish, but in this market, I think we have to be, and that is basically shortlisting buyers and saying to them, if we get an offer, if things do change, because we do catch up with our owner one more time before the auction, if things do change, are we to give you a call that an offer has been received? And if we are to give you a call, are you in a position to put an offer in? Because if you're not, that's okay, but we don't want to be wasting our time with buyers that aren't qualified and ready for this home either.
Yep, that's fair, because then that's where pre-approval comes in, like how set up are you with finance and, are you negotiating terms? And this goes back to that sweet spot, like what is the best time for these buyers to get their terms negotiated with Section 32s reviewed, or even the building and pest?
Yeah, I think as soon as possible.
Yeah.
We need a 5% deposit because of, we're seeing more now drawn out settlements because people need to sell before they, settle the next place, right? So drawn outs of 120 days, but we need to articulate that to the owner. Why? And get an understanding of, okay, look, it might be 120 days, but it could be shorter if they get a short settlement on the next place too. Well, for most owners, if they're getting the right amount of money, that's okay.
Yeah, true.
So terms, we need X amount settlement, pricing. If it needs to be a subject to finance clause before an auction, well, we need to have that communicated, because if you turn up to auction, bid, and it's subject to finance, well, that's not great for anyone.
No, because that, for those that aren't sure, means you bought it anyway, even if you're not ready, and then you hope your mortgage broker can make miracles happen.
Yeah, so, it's a lot of pressure on everyone.
I've heard, like, there's so many stories I've heard where buyers just turn up to auctions underprepared. I'm sure you've seen the same thing where they've actually purchased or they've been the winning bid, and then they just don't have anything ready. They can't put a deposit down. They can't pay.
Yeah. They're asking us to put conditions into an unconditional contract.
Like, this is the key thing I want everyone listening to just be aware of. You can buy at auction. It's more than okay, but you've got to talk to the agent and prepare. Like, I can't stress it enough. Like, as a buyer's advocate, I think most of my conversation with buyers was always around, okay, you want to go to that auction? I'm happy to go. Here's what we need to do. And they're like, what? Why now? Like, don't we just do subject to us? It's not private sale. You're buying it. So the risk that you're going to take is you're going to pay for a building and pest. And you may not win the auction, and you've lost about $500 on a building and pest, but you've done the due diligence.
At least.
And $500 in the scheme of, an $800,000 to $1 million purchase is nothing.
Nothing.
So it's like
grand scheme of things.
Grand scheme.
Yeah.
And that's like, I know the costs add up. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss that, but it is big picture.
Again, right, you don't want to lose your deposit.
No.
Or them chasing you for the rest of your life because you've now technically defaulted on a contract which you've signed, or put your hand up at an auction. We read in the auction rules, false bids, we provide fines for such conducts as well. And technically that's considered a false bid.
Oh my God. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. Have you ever had to hand one out?
A false bid? No.
Yeah. Oh,
no.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think if I had my time again, I probably would have. There was one auction definitely, but I think I was too green to understand how to actually deal with that at the time.
Yeah, but you're like, oh, maybe.
Like thinking about it now, God, I would have given them a fine at ASAP.
Wow.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about the conduct? Like, what gave it away?
They were completely disrupting the auction, like completely. So it was a quiet auction. It was a midweek Thursday, and there was a group of buyers that were there, and we had an agent on the phone to a buyer, which we disclosed to everyone, and we were well below the advertised price, and they were trying to break me at $1,000, which, at the end of the day, we've got to get things moving. $1,000, $100,000 below the range is not going to move the needle enough to get us there. So the owner's instructions were quite simple. Don't take the bid. If we need to have a vendor bid, get a vendor bid closer to the reserve, or at least the advertised guide, and then pass it in if there's no further bidding, but don't start it that low. We said, okay. So we followed our vendor's instructions, and then they proceeded to blow up in front of everyone saying, you're refusing to take our bid because of X, Y, and Z.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Brought a lot of unnecessary comments into it. I won't get into that, but, then they stirred up the neighbors, and then the neighbors and them were fighting, and it was just, it was a hot mess. And then they came up to us afterwards and said, we'll pay the reserve price. I don't know why we just went through that.
Oh my God. Yeah, so. It's so bizarre to me.
It is. Oh God. I was green to it as I wasn't that.
Yeah.
It's probably around 3 years ago, and lucky my director at the time was there, and he
thank
was able
God.
to diffuse the situation quickly.
Yeah.
But like I had neighbours because I was doing the calls afterwards to some neighbours. Hey, we sold this a couple of weeks later, and they were like, "Geez, that was a tough auction. I felt bad for you. At least you held yourself." I was like, "Didn't feel like I held myself." Thank you.
Oh, far out.
Yeah.
I think, see, that stuff is just crazy to me that it happens. I'm like, but you want when you're buying,
Yeah.
you do want the agent to like you.
You do.
You want them to get along with you
Yep.
because what happens is you form a connection with, like I've had agents like, even myself when I was an agent, I'd love some of the buyers I worked with and I'm like, oh, far out. Like they missed out. Like, and I'm like, look, I will have something for you.
Yeah.
Like, just bear with me. I'll bring something to market. And I used to sometimes door knock properties and go, I've got these guys that missed out down the road. Would you sell? And that's how I actually sold my third house.
There you go.
So I remember just trying to match people to houses.
That's the job, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got a connection with someone, like you said, there's more willingness and wantingness. Like we deal with so many buyers, right? If we have got 19, 18 properties on the market, there's a lot of buyers we're dealing with.
It's a lot of people.
Being able to know someone really well, being able to find something that we know will suit them because the connection's there and we're speaking to them weekly, it's going to help everyone.
Oh, it's easier for everyone too. Like, you want the best result.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're not there going, cool, I don't care. But I guess that, and this is the one part I want to talk about is like, I guess that final week before auction, so I think that's where things get messy. Like we've talked about, like people not being ready, trying to come in at the last minute.
Yeah.
If you had the last minute building and pest, how often are you facing that and where is that a detriment?
We were facing that quite often, and then we decided as a office and as a team that we were pulling the pin on pre-auction building inspections by the Wednesday. So the Wednesday before the auction is the final day we'll allow that to happen.
Right.
And that's because in the event that something comes up, typically speaking, we won't get the report till, if it happens on Wednesday, probably
Friday.
Thursday, Arvo, maybe Friday. And that means we have to have someone either on standby or a building inspector to just be ready to do it on the Friday. But we won't get the report till Saturday.
Yeah, it's too late at that point.
So we've got no time to rearrange, to shuffle, to know if that building inspection is accurate or not. Sometimes they're not. So we've got to be mindful of that as well. Sometimes they can make a little thing bigger than what it needs to be. And a second opinion then is really important as well.
So I guess one of the things too is, moving into like reserve price auction day itself, can you explain how, I guess, the reserve conversations actually work with the vendors before auction day?
Yeah.
Because this is something that everyone
has no idea, right?
Because it's all, you're not hidden. I think
the
Victorian legislation changed slightly to say you have to put out.
Yeah, it hasn't come through yet.
Yeah.
I think they're in pretty intense conversations and battling, I think, with the REIV about that at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what that does to the industry, generally speaking. But with how it's currently legislated, they don't have to do it, which means the way we would run it, of course, is we would have our third Saturday, and ideally we would either hit our KPIs that we were talking about earlier, or now we'll catch up with the owners and we'll have that short list of buyers that have indicated that at a price that they'll look at it, at a price that they won't look at it, and who they are. We'll then discuss with them what the major scenarios and the main scenarios that typically occur on auction day are. Now, auction's a beast of itself, right?
Yeah.
Because you can plan for one specific scenario and the complete opposite can happen, or you can plan for no one to turn up and you have 4 people to turn up on the day. That's why people love auctions sometimes. So we need to be really acutely aware of all of that too. There's 3 typical scenarios that occur for an owner, and that would be the ideal scenario where they'll have a reserve price. We hit the reserve price. We're selling. It's on the market. Happy days. It's pretty straightforward from that perspective. Now, the second scenario and third scenario we're seeing more and more common, and that's where you might have bidding and it stalls. And in that event, we have to come inside and we'll have a chat with the owners and we'll tell them plan A and plan B. Plan A is that it's stalled, but we do feel that based on some of the momentum we're seeing, some of the conversations myself as the auctioneer and my team in the crowd are having with some of those buyers around, are we on the market? Have we hit reserve? And sometimes you can get a bit of a feel for it, right?
Yeah.
The advice we would give to the owners is, well, maybe we need to adjust the reserve price lower to what you initially had it at to essentially boost this auction up so that buyers can now compete, and taking it away from bidding against the agent and bidding against the buyers, and ultimately the best buyer wins. So, of course, there's risk to it for the owner, but we typically don't tell them that unless we genuinely think that there is a possibility there as well.
Yeah, of course.
The third scenario in that, of course, or plan B, is that we'll just say, look, we don't think that that's the case. We don't think there's more out there if we do this. It's highly likely if we just adjust our reserve down, you don't sell for more, you just sell for that. And no owner's happy to hear that.
No,
So
of course.
for that, we then have to back our negotiation skills in, right? And
Yeah.
we'll just say, we'll just pass the property into the highest bidder. That highest bidder has the exclusive right to the negotiation. And that's really important for buyers to know because although you haven't bought it, you have put yourself in the box seat. Now, I get the whole crowd to do a round of applause. And I had even a couple of weeks ago where the whole crowd's, clapping away. And I've said, congratulations if we formally passed the property into yourself. And some of the people in the crowd are like, oh, they bought it? No, not yet. They haven't bought it. But they came inside. We were negotiating with them. People wanted to deal with us outside. But unfortunately, we have to respect the rules that we had set and the parameters we'd set. They negotiated. They bought it for the reserve price and happy days.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is something that is so hidden behind the scenes because when you're talking about the stalled scenario, and I haven't attended an auction where there's been a stall yet, touch wood. I've been in a passing, like as in even auctions when I was working in real estate were very few and far between in the location I had. We had one auction, no one turned up.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
That was the market after GFC. It was bad. But I was going to say, when it comes to the stall, like, so you're actually pausing the crowd.
Yeah.
And you're saying, we'll be right back.
Yeah, we had one on the weekend. We took two breaks. We took two breaks.
Shit.
Yeah. Just to the owners, this is where we're at. We said to them, unless we get more, we don't think adjusting that reserve price is necessary.
Yeah.
Then we got a bit more. And then we said, we stopped the crowd. Hang on a minute, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going to seek further instructions again. Came inside. We were about probably $5,000 short of what the owner initially wanted as a bottom line. We said, put it on the market. This is that time. We've got enough bidding now. He reluctantly did it, but took the advice and he sold it. I think he ended up selling, reserve was 1,265, sold for 129.
Gosh.
So
that's awesome.
We got what we wanted in the end.
I think that's all like the mental game behind it, right?
Yeah.
It's the minute that someone's not calling, it's on the market.
Yeah.
Buyers start to get a bit like,
Correct.
shit, well, what is that
doing?
reserve?
Yeah.
Like, how high are we going here? The guide was here, now we're not at reserve.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that confidence starts to come down. So it's really up to like a good agent or the auctioneer.
To assess it, yeah.
To assess it and talk to the vendors. Because I think a lot of buyers don't know that the vendors are chilling out inside. Like, they've got some stalkers in the back.
Yeah, literally.
Watching them through the window going, how's it going?
Who's that one? Yeah.
So I think a lot of people don't realise that it's active.
Yeah.
It's not just...
and owners are just as nervous. I think some people can perceive owners as just these people on their high horse at the back and, the seller's X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. But the owners are just as nervous, irrespective if it's home, deceased estate, whatever it is. They're nervous. They want a result. Some of them have invested their own money into it. Some of them have emotional attachment to it, right? So we've got to massage both parts, get the buyer to a position where they're comfortable, but also have the really educational conversation with the owner of this is what we think the best outcome could be if you did X, Y, and Z.
Yep, 100%. I think that nervousness from the owner is valid. Like,
oh yeah,
even my grandma's house was up for sale last year in May, and the agent said, did you want to go with auction?
Yeah.
And my grandma was like, no, she was too nervous. She said even the thought of it.
Fair enough, scares people.
Yeah, because it's such high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
So it's like it could go really well. We could get a shitload out of it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, that if we don't have confidence in the agent going that far with the sale, like her house was, like a $1 to $1.5 million value.
Yeah.
And I'm like spewing, I wish I knew you back then. It's like you would have got a good result. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, shit. But I remember just thinking, I said, look, it's up to you. You got to be comfortable. Like it's high risk, high reward. But private sale is, at least you can negotiate.
Yeah.
And I don't think a passing is all bad, to be honest, because often, like how often are you seeing properties that when they've passed in, they're still selling either a week later or same day in some cases?
Most. And again, it's not a one size fits all, that answer.
Of course.
Because there are owners that unfortunately, I guess you can say that they don't necessarily need to sell.
Yep.
So they can hold their price and are holding their prices at the moment as well. So they're not moving and there's no adjustment. But there are many owners at the moment that although it passes in, there are buyers out there that still want to talk. And in this market, I think with just how uncertain things are, when people turn up and there's no opening bid, there's no second bidder to it, and it's a pretty dull auction, people get even more uncertain with what's going on with the outcome and putting their best foot forward. So that having those private conversations are really important, making people still feel really comfortable in the process, backing the data, also understanding that we're in real estate in Australia, right? Australia, irrespective of what it's doing now, if you look at the trajectory over the last, 50 years, it's gone down every now and again, but it's always continues going up. So we are in a moment of time where it's cyclical. We've seen it, we understand it, but it's also a really good time to buy.
Yeah, it is.
And also understanding a buyer's needs. A lot of the buyers that are in the market that are transacting today, I'm finding are the buyers that are actually looking to buy, that have just sold and looking to buy now. So they're upsizing and they're making a lot of money up that way.
And I think that's the cool thing to see these people come back to market after seeing, selling them their first home or their starter home. And then, they're coming back into the market now in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
A quick pause, we'll be right back. Here's a word from one of our sponsors who supports the show. If you've ever considered investing commercially instead of residentially, then you need to have a chat with Michael Leipnick from Aston Constructions. Aston Constructions specialises in childcare as an investment strategy. They'll see through the project from development all the way to the end to renting it out. He works with investors looking for structured commercial opportunities beyond the standard residential path. If that's something you're exploring, his details are in the show notes below. Reach out and have a chat. And I want to, before we wrap up, because I wanted to do this story with you. This was a submission from one of our listeners. This is our Reddit Real Talk segment. Yeah. So we get listeners that submit their stories to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out this one here and I'm going to get your response to it and see how you'd manage it.
Let's go.
All right. So this one here says, "Hi all. I've been attending a few auctions but have not been successful yet. Could someone please enlighten me on what goes on after the hammer falls and the highest bidder goes into the house? ? I assume it's on the market, then the final price is the sold price. You go in, sign papers, pay the deposit, crack the champagne, stick the sold sticker on the board. However, if it fails to meet reserve and is passed in and the highest bidder is invited in for negotiations, what is the negotiation process? Do you just sit down with the vendor and the real estate agent face to face and go back and forth until an acceptable price is reached? Or do 6 agents stand over you and try and strong arm you into paying more than you are comfortable? Just trying to get an idea of what to expect. Any tips on negotiations? So this is a great question.
Bring a bodyguard with you in your negotiation.
Strong arm you. It's like, oh my God. What's your immediate reaction?
I'm thinking, I don't know what movie she's experienced or he's experienced or seen. I'd also want to know if they've been or seen something like that happen before.
I feel like they're so not sure about what happens behind that door that they've fantasized what could possibly happen.
The mind does some incredible things with imagination. God. No, neither occur.
Okay.
We typically speaking, I can't speak for all agents, but I would not want my owners in that conversation because the owners are more emotionally invested.
Yep.
So if I had my owners there, I had one actually where they came down and says, I want to speak to the buyer, and the deal did not eventuate.
I can imagine why.
Just there's too many emotions at stake, so we've got to take that aside, and we've just got to be the diplomat in that situation, right? But if it passes in and we're negotiating, typically speaking, the buyer will sit in the lounge room, the owners are upstairs somewhere. We'll say to the buyer, look, obviously you've not hit the reserve. We're going to go up and reconfirm that with the owners. But in current state, is there anything better that you can do? What are your terms you're currently looking at? Because in an auction, we'll open up 30, 60, 90 days. Yeah. What are the specific terms we're now looking for, right? So getting all of that written down, we go up to the owners. The owners, typically speaking, in that event, they're not feeling the best. So we've got to understand that. And there's probably more work being done upstairs in that initial conversation of this is the reality of it. We've planned for it a lot of the time that week before that we knew that this most likely would happen. And the reserve that we might have had set might have been with an adjustment of, $50,000, a $50,000 band reserve that, we'll hold out for this. But worst case, we're going to have it at this.
Yeah.
So from there, we'll then just talk to the owners. Well, this is what they're saying. This is the offer. This is how close we are within that 50 grand band. Do we push? How hard do we push? Do the terms change your thoughts? If it's a 30-day settlement, does that change anything on your price? Getting a real good understanding at that time, because that time can really now, the owners have seen it for what it is. The day in the sun. It's not the agent telling you anymore. It's
the
now
market.
the reality, right? So they face that, the reality of it, and then we'll go back and forth with the buyer and the owner. We'll go facts, we'll go data, we'll go emotions, we'll talk about everything, and then hopefully we'll nut it out and get a result.
Wow, I love knowing that's a really good explanation. So to that person who submitted that, don't stress. You don't need a bodyguard.
Yeah, no, you don't.
and you don't need to bring anyone to the auction. They're not going to strong arm you.
No.
But it's good to know. I think that's a lot of mystery for new buyers in the market going, what happens when you go into that house?
Yeah.
It's like, are you guys all there like, right, go for it, duke it out, come to
an arm wrestle for it.
It's like come to an agreement and then leave.
No.
So good. Thank you for explaining that.
No stress.
So I can't believe how fast the time's flown with you. This has been such a great conversation. I think so insightful. I think for someone listening who's either buying or selling at auction, what's your final piece of advice to them to help them feel more prepared?
Honestly speaking, I think either find a professional, being either a real estate agent or a buyer's advocate that you trust, and have some open conversations of what your needs are and work out how they can best help you. Honestly speaking, that I think is probably the best approach. But, if you are going down the path of doing it yourself and going to open homes, be upfront with what you're looking for, be upfront with what you're prepared to pay within reason, of course, and obviously protect your own interests to a degree, but make sure that you're at the forefront of an agent's mind in that campaign so that they can articulate to you how things are traveling, and if things change, they can come to you.
I love that. Great advice. And Ty, thank you so much. And I can't let you go without telling me if our no BS statement is bullshit or not. So before we wrap up, just to remind you, so the no BS statement was a passed-in auction tells you the campaign didn't create enough buyer competition on the day. Now, after everything we've spoken about today, do you think that's bullshit or not bullshit?
I think it's bullshit.
I love it. Okay.
To be honest, I think there are some circumstances where things might have happened on the back end that people might not have seen, and the auction just might not have been the right time or the right method for some buyers. People turn up on the day and they get scared by the auction method, and in front of people having to put their hand up. The competition might be there right afterwards.
Yeah,
still
true.
On the same day, still within auction conditions, but just not in that publicised auction method.
It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair. I would have said the same thing, to be honest, because there's so many factors. And after the conversation that we've gone through today, there's so many ways that these auctions run, in terms of buyer intent, buyer interest, if it's going to sell, pass in. And like I said to you, I don't think passing in is a bad thing.
No, it's not.
I think that's a misconception a lot of the time for the sellers to say this is bad, the campaign stuffed up.
It happens.
And it's like it happens. And in the market we're in at the moment, it's tough.
Properties still sell after auction.
That's
I think
right.
that we say that a lot to owners, that obviously it's not a great thing to pass in. It's not a great feeling. We get that. Of course. But this happens so often. If every property that ever passed in stayed on the market, how many options would there be for buyers?
And
a bloody long list.
And like you said, buyers get nervous on the day, like to actually put their hand up, but you find that the intent is still there. They're probably waiting for a pass in, to be honest, and then they're coming back to go, okay, I want to negotiate now.
Yeah, and then it's a Dutch auction afterwards. Like we'd had that on Saturday. These things happen.
Yeah. So, no, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. This has been awesome.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Anytime. You're always welcome back.
Appreciate it.
And I guess for everyone tuning in, thanks so much for tuning into the No BS podcast. Every week, you guys are awesome, and for submitting your stories. I think the moral of the story here is that for buyers, hopefully this episode helped you understand what to do before auction day. Get your contract reviewed, speak to the broker, know your limit, sort out building and pest early and your terms early, and communicate with the agent. Don't be afraid of them. And for sellers, hopefully this has helped you understand what the campaign is telling you. Buyer feedback matters, repeat inspections matter, price commitments matter, and the best results usually come from strategy, not just, crossing your fingers on auction day or having the day in the sun. So sometimes it might just mean that the negotiation has moved from the front lawn to the next room, and that's not a bad thing. So once again, thank you, Ty.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as always, if you got value from today's episode, you can connect with Ty. His details are on screen and in the show notes below. And if you want to reach out, have a chat. Like I always say, it costs nothing to make a phone call and have that conversation.
Exactly right.
So we'll see you next time on the No BS Real Estate Podcast. I'm Jo Agresta. Bye for now. That's a wrap for this episode of the No BS Real Estate Podcast, powered by Abodi AI. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might need it. If you're looking for more guidance on your home buying journey, you can visit www.abodi.com.au for expert advice, property insights, and the tools you need to find the right home with confidence. If you're already on your journey, you can also download our app. Just search Abodi AI on the App Store or Google Play. Have any questions or want to connect, you can follow us on Instagram at abodi.com.au or send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.